and listen to it again if you missed anything or if I went too fast over something. Hopefully I won't. But also you can listen for those questions that get answered after you hang up the phone because you had to go back to work. So please feel free to type your questions. Anything you want to know, I will answer that for you. Well, you know, anything about this topic that you want to know. All right, so let's get started here. We are talking about Agile Risk Management. Agile Risk Management, particularly on high-profile, highly risky projects, often in the government sector. The case studies I'll be showing you today will be, one of them has nothing to do with government, but another one was with a federally mandated requirement set. So it was, people ask often, you know, well, you can't do Agile with fixed requirements. Well, this was a federally mandated fixed requirements project. So we'll talk about that and how it went. But before we get started, it's important that we're all on the same page about what we're talking about. And what we're talking about today is risk. What is risk? Looked up the definition online, of course. Everybody looks things up. The definition of a risk here is a situation involving exposure to danger, anything that could cause you problems. Now, in PMI, we actually expand, you know, the Project Management Institute expands that definition out to something funny. I think it's on another slide, but I'll say it right now, called positive risks. Positive risks. The rest of us call those opportunities, but PMI calls them positive risks. So they are something that, you know, may or may not happen, and you don't know whether it will come about, but it's something that you expect has a possibility of happening. There's a danger. There's a subtle difference I want to talk about between a risk and an assumption. Now, most people don't think about this, and I actually hadn't thought about it for a while until I was putting this deck together. And there's a story behind putting this deck together, too. I'll tell you through the phone call here. An assumption is merely a risk that you assume 100% probability. Hear that again. An assumption is merely a risk or an opportunity that you assume has 100% probability. Right? You are saying that it has, I believe 100% this is going to happen. I can't prove it, and that's the definition of a risk or assumption, is that you cannot prove it one way or another. Right? If you could prove it, then it's a fact. If you can prove that, you know, that it's going to rain today, I don't know how you'd prove that. I could prove that it's raining now, though. Right? If I was in a box without windows, I could only assume whether it was raining or not. Once I can look outside or stand in the rain, I can prove that it is raining. All right? So that's the difference between a risk and assumption. An assumption is something that you believe has 100% probability of happening, and a risk or assumption is something that you cannot prove. You cannot prove that they're going to happen. So when you are writing, so you hopefully have your let me see if I have that open right now. Did you all get a copy of the worksheet that goes with this webinar? If you didn't, oh, look at this. If you didn't, there's a link that I posted in here. Let's see if it's still here. No. There's a link that I posted in the chat way at the beginning. You can see it. That will lead you to the PDF file. Here it is. Putting it out there for you again. There, that should be it. Leads you to the PDF file that is the little worksheet for this webinar. You saw got to see my book in progress there. So this is the worksheet, and we'll be answering some of these questions. So you should have just filled in this defining what a risk is and the key difference between a risk and an assumption. And then we're talking now about the 3 parts of a risk. All right? What are the 3 parts of a risk statement? 3 parts of a risk statement are, you know, what is the event? Some event that may happen. Again, you can't prove it. It just may. So it may rain today, and then the phrase something like, which may result in, right? That gives you a possible result, and then what's the consequence? If you don't have those three things, you just, I don't know what you have. You have some kind of statement or a worry or something to clearly articulate to yourself, to your teams, to your sponsors and executives what risks we're talking about. You have to have all three of those parts, right? You have to be able to tell them what's the event, it might happen, and what's the consequence. If they don't know the consequence, they don't know to be worried about it or how worried to be or anything like that. So you need to have all three of those pieces. This is basic risk stuff, but I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page with what we're talking about as far as risk, because it's really interesting. In the Agile world, we don't talk too much about risk, and we should. We actually need to. That's why we're doing this webinar. There are 4 risks that are the most significant risks on any project, right? These are the 4, like, non-starters that are really, really bad if they happen, okay? Those are, there's the risk that you will deliver nothing. There is the risk that you will deliver the wrong thing. There is the risk that you will deliver the right thing, but too late. And there's a risk that you will deliver something that doesn't work. These are, I think, the biggest worries that your executives have. Still seeing the opening screen. Oh, my gosh. All right. Thank you, people, for letting me know that. Oops. All right. Here's the second screen. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea, for letting me know, and Dennis and Chris. Yes, here's the definition of a risk written down right here. It's a noun, situation involving exposure to danger. A risk or assumption is something that has, an assumption has 100% probability. And then here are the 3 parts of a risk statement. Some event that may happen, which may result in some consequence. All right. This is what happens when you're doing a live webinar. You get all the warts and wrinkles along with it. So here we are. The 4 risks are that you will deliver nothing, you'll deliver the wrong thing, you will deliver the right thing too late, or even worse would be deliver the wrong thing and too late, or you will deliver something that doesn't work at all, right? And we all have these worries, especially on large, especially on mission-critical projects. There's a big concern that, oh my God, we're going to get to the end of this thing, and the money's going to run out, and they won't be able to deliver anything, especially on traditional kind of sequential, what Agilists call waterfall projects or products, that you will deliver nothing. You'll get to the end, and there's nothing left to show, nothing to show for it because we didn't get done in time. Or that you'll get to the end, and you'll deliver it to your customers, and they say, that's not what I needed. That wasn't what I wanted at all. Or you'll get out there, and it's too late, or obviously something that doesn't work. All right. Let's look at those 4 risks and some ways that being agile, just by its nature, just by the fact that you are taking an agile approach. And now, I haven't gone into what agile is in this call. If you want that, I'll point you to a couple of other webinars that I have that have a great amount of detail at the beginning of those webinars on what agile is, and how I believe agile works. Fundamentally, we're talking about delivering incrementally and iteratively all along working software. So these are that we'll look at here are 6 different things that help to mitigate and reduce the risks that we just talked about, those 5 or 4 big risks. So incremental delivery. Let's look at this. I'm going to get my little pen out here. So if we deliver incremental pieces of working software, if it's software or working products of whatever type, if I'm delivering, I don't know, cars, if I'm delivering incremental pieces of a car, right, the WikiSpeed car was delivered using an agile approach called Scrum. They had a working product every single time. So if we're delivering iteratively and incrementally, then we are mitigating some of these risks. We are mitigating at least the risk of delivering nothing. We are actually mitigating the risk of delivering the wrong thing if we're talking about iteratively, because then we're delivering, we'll be able to make improvements to the product as we go through. Delivering the right thing too late, well, we will mitigate that risk because we have been delivering all along, and we will see that. Not so much on this one, but some. And here, the last one is, let me put this away, hold on a second. Delivering something that doesn't work. Well, that is absolutely mitigated by delivering incremental working products. So the two biggest ones, I believe, for incremental are delivering nothing and delivering something that doesn't work, right? When you deliver incrementally, you are able to mitigate those risks, completely eliminate those risks, because you're actually delivering working product the whole way through. All right, let's click again, and I'm going to actually add all these in so I can just draw my lines. All right, so let's take the second one. If you do customer demos, and that if you're using Scrum, that's part of Scrum. If you're doing using a Kanban type approach or any other iterative and incremental approach, you want to be showing your customer all along what you've got. Well, the demo is definitely going to mitigate delivering the wrong thing. That's the biggest thing that mitigates, because you're showing it to them and you're getting their feedback, right? The demo itself, looking at these four, it doesn't really mitigate the rest of those, but it definitely mitigates that one, which is a huge problem, right? Failing fast, delivering and finding out your errors quickly, that again goes to delivering the wrong thing. It also gets to mitigating the delivering something that doesn't work. When we take an agile approach, we do something called value prioritization. So I take all of the features that used to be in a requirement specification, right? Some big, thick document that we developed at the beginning of a project or product definition. And we break that down into little pieces that make it up, and we prioritize those. Every single one of them is prioritized. And we'll find out, actually, when we make them small enough that some of them actually aren't really necessary. But some of them are hugely important, and we want to deliver those hugely important ones first. So we value prioritize things, and at all times, so if we value prioritize and deliver working product incrementally, then we will never have the problem of delivering nothing, right? Because I'm delivering incrementally, and I am delivering the most important things first. So this also gets to, we're mitigating the risk of delivering the wrong thing. One of the architectural principles that we try and apply in an agile approach is to loosely couple the pieces of work. So if I'm building an airplane, I want to loosely couple the systems within that airplane, right? I don't want to have the back of the seat TV screens be tightly coupled with the air purification system, right? Because if I need to make a change in the air purification system, it should not impact my back of the seat TV screens or any other piece, right? You want to loosely couple these modules so that if there is an improvement in the back of the seat technology, I don't have to change the technology in my air system. Now, that was a ridiculous example, but if you think about maybe the control systems in the cockpit of the airplane, there are a lot of independent, discrete, yet interdependent systems there. You want to loosely couple those with clearly defined contracts between the systems. So you have a very few interfaces between those systems, and they're very clearly defined how they communicate with each other, such that If I need to make a change to the flight guidance system, it does not affect the landing gear. That actually is something that you could talk about as having actual interrelationship if you weren't paying attention to this principle of loosely coupling modules. So why do I go off about that? Well, if you have loosely coupled modules, you will reduce the problems with delivering something that does not work, because often the reason things don't work is that we've made changes through our systems all the way through, but everything's so spaghetti tied together that the last minute change I made in the flight guidance system did impact the stabilization system. There should be a relationship between those two systems, right? The stabilizer system and the flight guidance system. However, changing the flight guidance system should not change the stabilization systems, right? So if we loosely coupled those, then we're not as worried about delivering something that doesn't work. Neither are we worried as much about delivering nothing, or delivering the wrong things, or delivering the right thing too late, because, and actually value prioritization gets to delivering the right thing too late as well, because you're delivering the most important things up front. So you will have those things done and working well before you need to be delivering anything. Distributed decision making. So this is a concept that I've recently written an article on. I'm trying to think if I published that one yet. I believe it was in project management, projecttimes.com, about distributed decision making. And the way that this helps is that it reduces the overhead associated with decision making that has to always be made at the top. Right? There's a common problem that decisions always have to be made at the top, or have to be made, by XYZ person. And we can go into what distributed decision making is, but I'll send you a link to that article and you can talk about it. By pushing decision making down to the people who are actually working in the systems, who have the most knowledge about the systems and still have great knowledge about the customers, you greatly reduce the potential of delivering the wrong thing, and delivering the right thing too late, because they are making the decisions at the level that is appropriate for those decisions, right? You're able to make high-level product decisions down at the development layer, right, where sounds like I'm talking about software, but I'm really not. I'm thinking about airplanes, or I'm thinking about a marketing team, right? The marketing, if you're in a marketing situation and you're developing a marketing campaign, you want the people who are developing that campaign to be able to make the decisions about that campaign. Because if you don't, if all the decisions have to be made by some higher up, and then basically execution is done by the lower rung of people, a lot of things happen to your culture, right? You have negative impacts on your culture. You have negative impacts on the products. You have delays that come in because that person who's having to make those decisions becomes a bottleneck. That's a huge risk to your project and to the quality of your product. But I digress. That's a completely different webinar about distributed decision making. But you can see here, these are just a few of the elements that make up being an agile worker, working in an agile way, and they significantly mitigate the risks that are most common in industries, just by the very nature of delivering small pieces of working products or services up front quickly, right? I say that because there is not a lot of attention paid to risk management by most folks in the agile world, who are agile coaches and agile practitioners. We don't spend a lot of time, and I'll say myself, I don't spend a lot of time talking about risk, and depending on the context, you have to. But the reason we don't spend a lot of time talking about it is by the nature of what we do, we have reduced the need to focus on that so much. All right. Moving on. Oh, let's see, erase all drawings. All right, there are 3 key times in an Agile context where you will be looking at risk. Now I'm talking about a high-risk project. So say a federally mandated something with FDA or some other kind of regulations that are required, FCC, FDA, FAA, any one of those federal agencies that's going to be watching over you, or some kind of mission-critical product, right? If you are working on the heart of your company, the main value delivery product or service for your company, you are in a high-risk situation. And we'll be talking about one of those, an example of exactly that here in just a minute. Yes, that was it, the health cost estimator. So these 3 times are at initial planning. So when you are first chartering, kicking off a project, starting a piece of work, developing a new product, you want to be looking at overall project risks. You want to look at internal and external risks. You want to look at the features of whatever product or service you're developing and look at the risks specifically associated to that. You want to look at schedule risk, which often equates also to costs or budgetary risk. Right? These are the 4 keys at initial planning to be looking at project risk, internal, external, feature, and schedule risks. You may look at other things depending on your specific project, but those are the 4 key ones. I want to look at sprint planning next. This is if you're taking an iterative, an incremental approach that uses Scrum. They call them sprints. So that language just drops in naturally. If you're taking a lean Kanban approach, you still work with cycles. You're just looking more at a talk time. And if you use Kanban, you understand what talk time means probably. So you're still looking at, as I'm delivering on cadence, what are the new feature risks that I need to update, right? The existing or new feature risks, as well as looking at the risk burn down. Risk burn down, what the heck is risk burn down? Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's a way of visualizing your risks throughout the life cycle of a project or product development. And then at the daily stand-up time, right? This is the best time to be looking at in the immediate, because risk realization actually happens at the stand-up. Well, risk realization happens in the work, but you'll be able to spot it very quickly in the stand-up if you're paying attention to it. Too often, though, we hear people say, the daily stand-up turns into a robot meeting, right? Where people say, yeah, I worked on this story for 6 hours yesterday. I'm going to work on it for 6 hours today. I was totally stuck yesterday, and I'm going to work on it for 6 hours more today. No roadblocks, right? How many times have you heard that? 1 million. But as a project leader, you need to be looking at that and going, whoa, 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 whoa. You worked on this for 6 hours yesterday. You were totally stuck, and you're going to work on it for another 6 hours today. Why is that not a risk? Why? Well, sounds like you need some help. Do you? Let's talk about this. Don't let that just pass by. But too often that it turns into a rote, routine meeting, and it just goes by. So pay attention. Look for those roadblocks. Pay attention to what people are saying and what they're not saying. All right, read between their lines a little bit. You can find those risks that are popping up as you go. All right. Health cost estimator was a large project that I was on, actually, not as a coach. Well, it ended up being more like a coach, but I was actually the Uber Scrum Master of this. This was for a very large health insurance provider in the Pacific Northwest. It was mostly waterfall context, but a few folks were doing Agile. I had 100 team members on 5 teams. Not all of them were in Agile teams, but I had 5 Scrum teams. It was a 3-year, $8.5 million project, and the baby of the CEO, right? He loved this thing. What we were doing was developing a way of looking at if you needed to have a knee repair, right? Meniscus, something happened. So how would you find out the cost for that? Currently, there's no way, right? Your doctor doesn't even know how much an office visit costs, much less how much the anesthesiologist is going to charge you in the hospital as a separate bill from the hospital, from the doctor in the ER, or in the operating room. So nobody understood that. Health insurance companies said, hey, you know what? We've got the information all here in our records. We'll cull through it, de-identify it, make these groupings that say, you know, this was a meniscus something. So we were able to pull out this cool information on how long it would take, how long you could expect to be before you were back on your feet, pun intended there, how much cost you would incur, what kinds, how many MRIs or X-rays or what kinds of medication you might take. It's a very, very cool project. We did it all using an Agile approach. Why? Why was this a challenge? Well, there was high company risk. Part of what we were doing was exposing the costs associated with this, and there were some people within this organization who believed that you share that information and we've now lost our competitive advantage as a company, as an insurance provider. People will turn around and use that against us in negotiation. It's kind of complicated. If you want to know, let me know, and I'll talk about it offline with you. But there was serious concern, so serious that some groups of people had stalled this project for a while. But the project had high importance to the CEO. He really believes in this, believed in it, and still believes in this approach. There were no external drivers. This was something that the CEO felt this is the way we should be going. Having this information out there will begin to change an industry in a positive way. So we were pushing to do it. Why did we take an Agile approach? Well, Waterfall had failed twice. Once, it failed because they got the product out there and the folks who were worried were right. The company was actually sued for the information that they were putting out there, and they didn't lose the lawsuit, but it was a big brouhaha and not what they wanted out of it. So Waterfall failed there. They actually had to pull down the system at that time. And the second time it failed, it just failed to deliver. Didn't deliver. And this was like for 4 years prior to my getting there. And the other reason, well, IT wanted to use Agile. They just were feeling like that's the way to go, which is good. So what were the results that we got out of this? Well, it was pretty amazing. By taking an iterative and incremental approach, we were able to reduce the risks in that project by slowly exposing those risks to slowly answering those risks and exposing the results to the internal stakeholders so that they could see, this is what we're planning on showing, and they would say yes or no, or pull that back, make it, tweak it, and we could make those little tweaks and show it to them again, and they would say, well, okay, we can go with that, and then they would go with that. So that was, I believe, the most amazing part of it was we were able to get through those roadblocks with people who were seriously concerned about the health and welfare of the company, and show this by showing it incrementally. So we delivered the most important features first, and that was critical. We were able to get a valuable system out there very quickly. Within a year, we were about 1.5 years in, and we had another 1.5 year product roadmap out ahead of us. We had done 4 major releases within there, and some other minor things happening behind the scenes as well. And at about 1.5 years, the project was canceled. So this project was going on in the middle of or just before the market crash of 2008, and in the market crash of 2008, the project got canceled because we didn't have the funding for it. We were tightening up on everything. It was really quite a shock. It was the CEO's pet project, and it was canceled midstream. Now imagine you have a 3-year, $8.5 million waterfall initiative. What have you delivered at a year and a half? Probably nothing. Probably nothing. You may be close to delivering like phase 1, but probably have delivered nothing because you spent most of the first year in planning, architecture, design. You might have started some development, and in 6 months you would have the first release or so. I would see in a 3-year project having the first release in a waterfall in year 2. That's probably reasonable. We had done 4 releases. So if we had been waterfall, we had been canceled here, we would have nothing to show. But we had 4 releases, customers were using it, and a year later, I received an email that that project had won a national award. It was a Blue Cross Blue Shield company, and they had won the Best of Blues award for that project. So I ask you, how many projects can mitigate all these risks, can deliver all these things, halfway through be canceled, and still win a national award for the best thing out there, with only half of our product delivered? Pretty amazing. So what would I do differently? I promised to share what I would do differently now that we're about 6 years down the road from that. I would explicitly define the risks that the stakeholders had. We explored the risks iteratively as we went through, and that was great, and it was successful. But I would go, if I were to do it all again, I would gamify a SWOT analysis. What does gamify a SWOT analysis mean? It means I would do a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. We would go through one of those, and in more of an agile kind of way, which would be making it more interactive and gamified, so that we could identify what all the opportunities and threats and concerns were that they had, so we could actually look at that. And then I would actively track and manage them in a risk burn down. A risk burn down takes those risks that you identify, right, the weaknesses and threats that you identify, and the things that are actually you believe are going to occur, and through looking at the probability and impact of those things, places them on a burn down similar to a sprint burn down, and then you are able to actively manage that. So as you pass a milestone, or as you deliver a feature that had a risk associated with it, right? So say I'm delivering the airplane, and we get the initial fuselage design completed. There may have been 20 risks associated with that, each with some associated valuation of the risk, and how you go about doing that varies depending on what you're looking at, how you evaluate it. We don't have time to get into that here, but you're able to then say, okay, we've gotten through this design and architecture, we've prototyped it, we now have the fuselage design done. I can now mark down those risks as either passed completely, or I can reduce their probability and impact because the situation has changed. So this is active integrated risk management. Remember how I said every iteration you are re-looking at your risks? This is what you're doing. You're looking at the probability and impact again and going, what have we learned? Okay, we've learned a lot. So now the risk of this happening is reduced. So now I don't have to worry about that one as much. I can burn that down. So the vertical axis here on this risk burn down, the vertical axis here is, I do it in a genericized point value way. If you go to Mike Cohn's Mountain Goat Software website, He has an article about risk burn down, and you can see he and I discussing in the comments that the way he does it is, and the way other folks have promoted it, is to do this in delayed days. So what you would do is you say probability 50%, impact 10 days of delay. So then the resultant would be 5 days, right? 50% of 10 days delay is a five-day delay metric. So you'd go up to 5 here for that one risk. So here we've got 45 days worth of delay using that method. And as we incrementally go through iterations here, iteration 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're able to burn that down because you're delivering some of that product. Does that make sense? I hope. I prefer this to be a generic thing because some risks are in days, but some are in dollars, right? Because if I'm doing software and I have to order a server, or I have to allocate new cloud space for new servers, that's not going to delay my project very long, right? I can whip out a PO for cloud space pretty quick, but it's going to cost me. It's going to have significant impact on the dollars associated with the project. So I want to make sure that that we understand both in delay and in dollars, and so we create this generic number. Now you have to be careful that everyone understands what those numbers mean, but let me see here. I'm seeing some questions. I'm going to have to answer these later. Cumulative for all the risks. Yes, Andrea, that is cumulative for all the risks identified. So you'd have, this would be one risk, and then another risk might have 2. Another risk has another 7. Another risk here has 5 more. Another 7 and 8 points of risk, or days of risk if you're using Mike Cohn's approach. We both agreed that the approach that I'm using is good too. Approach he's using good. The most important thing, the most important thing about this, hear this, visualizing it. That you are able to visualize the risks, because if they don't see it, it doesn't exist, right? You have to use tools that help visualize these risks so that people are paying attention. And it's not just you paying attention, but your project team is paying attention, the management folks are paying attention, your sponsors are paying attention, right? You have to use tools that make things visible to people. All right. Next, this was a federally mandated project. We were doing the updates to HIPAA 5010. Federally mandated EDI standards had a go-live date of January 1st, 2012. If we didn't hit that go-live date, guess what? We were charged $1. We were fined $1 per member, right? This was for that healthcare company again. $1 per member per day. We had 4 million members. So doing some very quick math, 4 million times $1, $4 million a day. That's what we would have been charged if we missed that January 1st go-live date. Think that was a high risk? Oh yeah, and it has to be federally mandated, so it has to be documented appropriately. It has to follow all their standards. This is healthcare, right? So you have to make sure you're covering your EDI, your PHI, personally identifiable health information standards. So very important project, high risk. Problems, we painted ourselves into a corner with this baby. We had mandated deadlines. We had architecture that was end of life. The processing system we were using, the vendor wasn't supporting it anymore. Oops. So we have this deadline looming over us and end of life software. We had some significant team turnover happening, and we were dealing again with large scale agility, and this was 8 years ago. So not everybody was doing it back then. It's interesting. I've been involved in large-scale Agile most of my Agile career. and I haven't done a whole lot of small team Agile. So here we go. What do we got? Benefits of taking an Agile approach. It was transparent. Quickly, you could see success or failure of each transaction as they were going through. We were able to easily change direction when we got blocked, and we got blocked. At one point, we found that we had finally created enough of the story backlog and points estimated it to look at the team's velocity, how fast they were delivering those features, and the points that were in the backlog, and go, okay, how are we going to do? We were going to miss our January 1st deadline by 6 months. That would be a lot of money. And so I was able to see that, right? Transparent, success and failure. I was able to show them, the project sponsors, where we were, and we were able to quickly change some of the architecture decisions we had made that were significant. We were trying to put in a new piece of architecture that would significantly save money for the organization over the long term. But unfortunately, we were trying to put it in on a project that was federally mandated with a deadline. So we had to pull that out. But this was like the heart of the EDI system, electronic data interchange, right? And it was the backbone of the EDI data transfer system. So architecturally, this was the heart of what we were doing. In a traditional waterfall approach, I ask this in classes all the time, like, how long would it take to change that? 6 months, at least, to make that kind of significant architectural change, and then change all the specifications, and then go change anything that you had written, or probably throw it away and start from scratch again. It took us 2 weeks because we were taking an iterative and incremental approach with loosely coupled modules. Our stories were loosely coupled enough that we were able to get rid of all the ones that were associated with that backbone, replace them with a much lighter weight approach, and move forward in 2 weeks. Actually, it only took us 1 week. The other week was when the sponsor had to go to all of his peers and tell them why they weren't getting their baby. Because everybody in the company wanted that backbone. It would make their lives so much easier. But he had to go tell them all that. So it really gave us the ability to change that direction quickly, and honestly saved the project from failure. We would have failed, period. It also gave us the best view of real status. Where are we today, right? Architecture, yes, so I just talked about those two things. It really allowed us to change that direction very quickly, and we were able to meet our milestone without any problems. Now the question is, what would I do differently today? I would now use a story mapping approach. It is much quicker approach and much gives a better picture of where everything is. People didn't understand how they related to the system. I think a story mapping approach to this EDI system, well, I just sit here thinking about how you would story map those data transactions. It's really cool. It would be very exciting. So I would definitely do story mapping. If you don't know how to do that, I have a video on how to do that on my YouTube site. You can just go to the video feed page on whitewaterprojects.com and see that. But the story map gives you a visual of how all of the pieces of the project fit together and form a cohesive whole, and it also shows you how important things are relatively to one another. It prioritizes things so that you can figure out, okay, I'm going to work on this, and it's because it's most important, and we'll work on this next. The other thing that I would do is then feed that story map into a Kanban flow for the major features. So a Kanban system would allow you to flow those features through, making them progressively more detailed and being able to track that visually while you limit the work in process, We didn't have a whip limit on the work that we were doing, and so there were some things where we were less efficient than we could have been 6 years ago, right? So people weren't really using Kanban much back then, widely. Some people were using it, but not everybody. I would also look at using a Monte Carlo analysis approach. Now, this is like, you want to know cutting edge of Agile thinking right now? Using Monte Carlo analysis, and if you're a traditional PMP, you remember Monte Carlo, right? That's what-if scenarios. You take the features in your system, you put risks associated with those features that talk about schedule or budget delays or budget increases or decreases. You put probabilities on those, and now you have a bajillion things with different probabilities. What do you do with that? You run a Monte Carlo analysis that says, well, if we have 10 things here, and on items 1, 2, 5, and 7, the risks are realized, what does the schedule look like? Okay, that's one what if. Next what if? What if the risks 2, 6, 4, and 10 happen? Okay, there's another risk. There's another scenario. Now what happens if, and you get the idea, you just go through the system, and if you have 200 of those things, though, it's crazy how many permutations you can have. But the great thing about that is, I love this approach. The great thing about the Monte Carlo analysis approach is it provides your sponsors with some true information, some real data to look at to say, you know what, these graphs down here are sort of a Monte Carlo analysis look. Say we've done this 1,000 samples model, and we have these 2 delivery dates right here and here. These are the 2 possible delivery dates based on the risks associated with it, right? The probability of delivering here, is very high. The probability of delivering here is lower. The chances of us being this late are really low, but the chances of us being this early are also really low. So we're most likely going to deliver here. But it shows your product owners that you're not just guessing at dates, that there are real risks associated with this stuff that we're doing, and that, that date we're giving you is a range of possibility. And it is possible that we're not going to hit that date, not because we don't want to, but because real life includes risks. Oh my gosh. And real life is messy. So real life needs a lot of scenario analysis. Pardon me. I would also look at risk adjusting the backlog. Sorry. Oh, that's exciting to me. I would also look at risk adjusting the backlog so that you can put those risks into the backlog as well. So a risk adjusted backlog takes some of it takes your highest priority risks and gives them a value on the expected monetary value for that, and puts them into your backlog, allows you to then see those things as real backlog items, actually. So when you're talking about your talk time, if you're doing Kanban, or your velocity, if you're doing a Scrum approach or an XP approach, you're able to see, oh, here's this chunk of work that we're doing, and it includes 25 points or 5 stories for this kind of risk, right? It allows you to adjust your backlog for the risks that are associated with it. Showing you how to do that is beyond the scope of what we're talking about here today, but you can look that up online. Actually, hey, look at that. Awesome. I was hoping my time was not going to run out, and it didn't. So I can take a minute and talk back here about risk adjusting the backlog. Risk adjusting the backlog allows you to put them in there. What you do is you analyze the cost associated with that risk, and you put stories into the backlog that have specific monetary value inserted into the backlog. They are actually put in as negative value, so that they adjust the backlog to show how your risk is going to negatively impact the project. All right. Look at our timing. This is awesome. It is 9:52, and we are just about done here. I'm going to erase my marks here. some of the stuff we weren't able to get to, like, how do you do those things, Joseph? Well, I got an hour. Actually, I was told you I would tell you the story about creating this deck. I went to create this deck and started working on it, and by the time I got done putting that deck together, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't get through this in an hour. There's no stinking way. I have about 3 hours worth of material just on this risk management stuff, looking at agile approaches to identification, evaluation, prioritization, risk responding, risk tracking. How do you do all these things, like the nuts and bolts of really doing it, as well as new techniques like risk burn down. How do you really risk adjust a backlog? How do you do that Monte Carlo analysis? How do you do something called reverse Ishikawa? That's something that I developed for risk identification. So the Ishikawa is a fishbone diagram, and I flipped that on its head to help you do risk identification. I couldn't get through all of that stuff in this call, but I do have all that information. So what I did was, I'm going to look at my mail. No, I'm not. I'm going to look at, I created actually another webinar that we can do. It will be about 3 hours long, and to do that, it's a significant investment of time for me and for you, and so I'm going to have to charge for the class. It would actually be a class. You can get 3 PDUs. It might actually go 4 hours. We'll see. I was going to refine it a little bit in the next few days, but here's the website for it. If you want to look at, hey, I want to know deeper on how the heck to do this stuff. Here's the link. It will take you to this website where we'll talk about, what's in the class, what's reverse Ishikawa, risk adjustment, probability-based forecasting, all of these things, so that you can understand how you actually do these things. It has a course outline, expected outcomes, and then a link to register for the class. I would love to teach you this. I was so excited putting the material together, and then once I looked at it and went, dang, this is just too big, I was kind of sad. But so I put this together. I hope you could attend it. If you do, I will give you a free copy of my book when it comes out. That would be fun to give you too. My book is due out, knocking on wood, later this month, maybe, or early in September. I'm shooting for later this month, but it's a work in process at the moment. Very excited. I want to thank you for attending. If you have more questions, let me know them. Let me see. I'll answer some questions that we've got here right now. Is there a video that shows us how to use Monte Carlo somewhere? Yes, I can send you the link for that. I don't have it with me right now. And thanks for scheduling. Thanks for no, you're welcome. I'm happy to have done this. Again, if you have any questions, email me. Go check out the extended class. I hope you'll attend it. It will be good, filled with good information. Really the nuts and bolts more than the high-level discussion on how you do it. But thank you for attending, and we will look forward to talking with you. Oh, wait. Don't leave. I wanted to tell you one other thing. If you haven't left yet, stop it. I have another class to tell you about that I am going to be doing here. It's a separate thing. It's not about risk. Ben, if you're still on the line here, Ben, you know this class. This is Being Agile in a Waterfall World. It's a class that I normally give live. I have created a web version of it, so if you've attended the live version, then this is just the same class. But if you haven't attended it, here is a great opportunity for you to attend this class. I'm giving it in 2 different formats. One is a 7-hour, 1-day shot, and the other is 4 2-hour sessions. Figured it's going to go 2 hours, So that one winds up being 8 hours, 8 PDUs. The other one's 7 PDUs. But in this class, we'll talk about, what does it mean to be agile? Can you be agile if you are not in software? Yes, you can. Here's a list of industries that are changing that all can benefit from taking an agile approach. I have a couple of videos here. Oh, there you are, Ben. This is one of your folks that was on this call with us, Ben Dunn. Did a little video testimonial for me. Ben works with waste management, waste processing at Hanford nuclear waste site. Software? No. So he had a great time at the class. It's a powerful class that people really walk away with tools to deal with what they're doing right away. So September 8th or 4 days in late September, 15th, 22nd, 29th, and October 6th. So there they are. 2 different class opportunities for you. Put that one out there. Thank you for attending today, and I will save this recording and talk to you sometime soon. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.